Good afternoon. Thank you for attending. The title of our presentation is Mobile versus Online Surveys, the Rise of the Smartphone. I'm Tom Wells. I'm from the Nielsen company. We're a small startup. You might have heard of us. This is research I've done with my former colleague, Justin Bailey. So let's just jump on into it. So basically, with this research that we're presenting today, we conducted a series of mobile phone experiments to, one, test various question types and formats on a mobile survey platform, and two, to test mobile surveys versus surveys done, the exact same survey done online, on the computer. And by doing both of these, we hope to gain a better understanding of what does and doesn't work with mobile surveys and how they can be optimized. So here's our approach. Basically, we used an app-based mobile survey. It's the Survey on Demand app by TechNeos, which is now part of Confirmment, which Sean was presenting on in the last session. This was fielded for respondents having Android, BlackBerry, and iPhone devices. However, it's available for more than just these platforms here. We used a large national sample of smartphone users for our research. Our survey was, I'm good. Can you hear? Oh, okay. All right. I'll do this. All righty. So our survey was short. It consisted of 24 behavioral questions on online, TV viewing, and consumer behavior. Each of these three sections contained 8 questions, 5 experimental questions, and 3 filler questions. And in today's presentation, we'll be presenting on 3 of those 5 experimental items. These experiments, this is what makes it kind of interesting. These were not just things we dreamed up on ourselves. These are experiments that had been done previously in mail surveys, online surveys, and mobile web surveys. And we carried these over to the mobile app platform to see if those experimental findings also carry over. And then finally, we did a parallel set of experiments with online respondents as well. So here's just a brief layout of our study design. We used respondents from 2 different online panels. One from the Knowledge Networks panel, which is now part of GfK. And those folks, the Knowledge Networks / GfK panel consists of a large group of pre-screened smartphone users who are also willing to take a survey on their smartphone. So for those folks, we randomly assign them to either the mobile app mode or to the online mode. The other panel we use for this is a panelist from the Nielsen online panel. Okay? However, this panel does not have that same large pre-screened group of smartphone users, so these folks were exclusively assigned to the online mode. Okay? However, for each of these 3 groups here, we also randomly assign them to either survey version A or survey version B. So you can see here we have a lot of paired comparisons that we can take a look at. However, for today's presentation, what we're going to focus on are the top 4 cells in the top right portion of the table. And 2 final notes here below the table. All of the respondents, even if they're taking the survey online, all of the respondents are online panelists who are also smartphone users. So we have one consistent group of respondents. And finally, this survey was fielded in November of last year. Okay, so I got 3 slides with screenshots on them, both iPhone and Android screenshots. This will give you an idea for the look and feel of the survey, and also give you an idea of the types of experiments that we're running. So this first one, we're testing low versus high frequency scales. And this particular experiment and this particular question has been used before in mail and mobile web surveys. And basically what you see here, same exact survey question. What we're doing is manipulating the response options. So on the left, we have a low frequency scale. On the right, a high frequency scale. And what's been found in previous research is that the high frequency scale, the one you see on the right, generates higher reported frequencies, even though the question's exactly the same. So we'll take a look at that one. In addition, we're going to take a look at this experiment as well. This has been conducted in both mail and online surveys previously. Same exact question. We're manipulating the size of the text box for an open-ended item. What's been found previously is that the larger the text box, the longer the open-ended response provided. And this is interesting to look at in the context of a mobile survey. Given the small keyboards on mobile devices, will people also be sensitive to the size of the text box provided. And then finally, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to test for primacy effects. Primacy effects reflect the tendency of respondents to select options at the top of a response list. So on the right, we see conventional layout. Again, survey questions exactly the same. On the right, response options are presented in alphabetical order. On the left, we're going to randomize response options. So every respondent gets a different random set of response options. And what we're going to take a look at is whether or not the response options appearing at the top of the list get a larger number of hits, simply because they appear at the top of the list. All right? And then final note here, this is also interesting for mobile surveys. What we've done here is work with a short set of response options so that everything fits on the screen and is visible without a need for scrolling vertically. Okay, so before moving on and presenting our experimental findings, just some summary statistics here. So for each of our 3 groups, we received more than 500 completed surveys, which we were very happy about. That exceeded our goal. Participation rate for the Knowledge Network / GFK panel was about 60%, which is very typical for the online surveys that they field. For the Nielsen online panel, obviously much lower at 10%. That too, however, is typical for what is observed with surveys for the Nielsen online panel. And let me just make one distinction here. The Knowledge Network's GFK panel is a survey research panel. That's its primary reason for existence. The Nielsen online panel is primarily an online audience measurement panel. Panelists have a meter installed on their PC, and we passively measure their internet activity. We also occasionally field surveys to that panel, but that's not its primary reason for existence. Okay, so moving on, for all 3 groups, breakoff rate was in the small single digits. We're really happy about that. And for each of the 3 groups, the survey comes in at about 5.5 minutes. Last 2 notes here below the table. Breakoff rate, specifically for the mobile app survey, was very low. We were pleased about that. As many of you in the room may know, for mobile surveys that are not optimized for mobile devices, breakoff rates can be very high, 30 percentage points or higher. And then finally, we also received a very small percentage of item missing data, so we were also very happy about that. Okay. So here are our results from our 3 experiments. The first one involves our frequency scales. And what we've done with this data table is collapse categories so we can make comparisons across 2 versions of the survey. And basically what I'm going to look at here is highlighted in row 2. We see with survey version B, with the high frequency scale, a much larger percentage of people report watching at least 2.5 hours of TV a day. The difference between A and B is about 20 percentage points, so it's quite big. We see that both with the mobile version of the survey as well as with the online version of the survey. The chi-square test that we ran basically confirms that the differences between versions are large and statistically significant. So with this particular experiment, we were able to replicate findings previously uncovered in mail surveys and in mobile web surveys. Sweet, huh? Okay, and the story is the same, that higher frequency scales generate higher reported frequencies. Final note here, is this the predominant finding that we uncovered? However, we did have the Nielsen online panel as well, and we did have 2 other survey questions, so there were some mixed results, but this is the predominant pattern which emerged. All right, moving on to the second experiment with the text boxes. So this is pretty easy to discuss. Looking at row number 1, we see that with survey version B, the larger text box, a larger number of characters are in fact entered. Not just for the mobile version of the survey, but for the online version of the survey as well. T-test confirms that. Differences are, they're not huge, but they're big enough that they're statistically significant. So again, with this experiment, we were able to replicate previous findings, in this case from mail surveys and online surveys. And the story, again, is that respondents infer the desired amount of information requested of them based on the size of the text box provided. Again, predominant finding, however, there were some mixed results here. Okay, finally, our third experiment. This is testing for primacy effects. And just to refresh your memory, here are the response options provided. However, we're not really interested in substantive content. What we're interested in is the position of appearance, the order of appearance, and the responses given based on the order of appearance. And that's what's presented here in columns 3 and 4. Now, if we were to observe primacy effects, we would see the highest percentage at the top of the list and a slow, steady decline down. But a casual observation shows that's not the case. The percentages are pretty much equal. They all hover at about 20%. So in this case, we don't observe any evidence of primacy effects. And that's borne out by our chi-square test as well. This, however, is a robust finding. We uncover the exact same pattern. We find no evidence across mode, across panel, or across survey question. So in this case, our results are not consistent. We don't find any evidence of primacy effects. So we're not consistent with previous findings from online surveys nor from mail surveys. Okay, so here are our main findings and takeaway points. And please promise me this is what you remember from the presentation, not the silly sound effects. Okay, so as we just presented with our research, we were able to replicate some previous experimental findings, but not all of them. We did find that responses to open-ended items may not be so burdensome, that mobile respondents seem willing to provide relatively short answers to open-ended items. We also found an absence of primacy effects, but this may reflect the fact that we kept our response lists really short. So the two main points here, an optimized mobile app survey, like the one we designed and the one we fielded, can have desirable properties, which can lead to a positive respondent experience and can reduce respondent burden. So things such as short questions, short response lists, a minimal need for scrolling, no grid items, and an overall short survey length, those things can all go a long way in terms of creating a positive respondent experience. And then finally, an optimized mobile app survey, like the one that we discussed here, can produce high-quality data, as evidenced by a high participation rate, a low break-off rate, and a small amount of item missing data. Okay, so that's all I had. Here's my contact information, and thanks again for attending.
Thanks very much, Tom.
Yes, Greg Peterson, Market Strategies. How are you? I'm just curious whether on your web cells, did you track whether respondents were attempting to do the web survey on a smartphone? And
Yes.
did you reject them?
Okay, so answer the first question is yes. We did pick that up. I did not present that in today's presentation, but as a matter of fact, we also had 161 people who were assigned to the web, but that were assigned to take it online, but took it on a mobile device. Okay? So that would have been row 3 here. So again, assigned to online on a computer, but instead decided to take it on a mobile device. What we found was their break-off rate was about 8%, and we found their completion time was about 8 minutes. And we took a look at it ourselves, and it looks awful. I mean, it's not supposed to be taken on the mobile web. And I'm surprised that not more than 8% of the people didn't break off, because it was very hard to read, involved a lot of pinching and scrolling, and the radio buttons were very tiny. So we did have those people in there, but we did not present on them today. Oh, and incidentally, I asked for a paper of yours or some slides of yours a couple weeks ago, so thanks for giving those.
I'm Tom Van Emmen from Allstate. My attention span has decreased substantially. I can't remember what were your findings in terms of open ends, and particularly I was expecting to see mobile-ended, open-end questions be shorter than what you experienced through online or other.
They were. Sorry. So here's how we have the data set up. We can take a look at that directly as well. What we're doing is for each mode, we're looking at A versus B. Okay? However, what we can also do is look across modes by version. So we can look at version A online versus version A mobile, and version B online versus version B mobile. So that would be more of a mode effect kind of research study. We were looking at each experiment within each mode. But again, the nice thing about the data, the way we collected it, we can do a lot of different analyses. So if you just take a look at it, this looks like it's a little longer, but I would probably guess it's not statistically significant. This comparison here looks like, again, favoring online. And I'm guessing it would be.
And question is, if you were doing this test again, were there any factors that, anything that you might have done slightly differently?
Yeah. So we asked 24 questions, and we thought we were kind of maxing out the number of questions. We thought it would be an 8 to 10 minute survey, and it actually came in at 5.5 minutes. So if we were given the opportunity to do this again, we actually might include more questions and perhaps get more variability in terms of breakout rates.
Thank you. Adam Jolly, EMI. I imagine that the mobile and PC were used from the same knowledge networks because you assumed they'd be the same type of panelist. Was there anything as far as looking at tenure of an online panelist, assuming it would be longer, more a seasoned panelist, more seasoned respondent compared to a mobile who you would think would be less seasoned just because of the newer technology, or does that matter?
That's a good question. We did not look into that in particular, but that's a really good question.
Do we have any more questions? For those of you, if you want to go to grab a seat, there's plenty of seats around the middle and the front here. Okay, thank you very much.